Hey everyone, welcome in, welcome in. We're so glad to have you here tonight with us, or this morning, whatever time it might be for you, with live art welding with Thea. You're going to have a great time over the next couple of hours. We're going to see some live art happen, but first we're going to go over some quick house rules, quick housekeeping. My name's Wendy. I'm going to make sure that everybody's having a good time today and keeping it respectful and figuring out how to do things. If you'd like to chat or ask questions or comment, feel free to post anything to the Q&A box there, and I'll go ahead and moderate those. That might be questions on, what's going on the screen. That's totally fine. You can upvote your favorite comments to increase the visibility. And then, of course, the Microsoft Code of Conduct. This is just, we want to have everyone to have a good time. This is a safe space. We want to be kind and respectful, all that kind of good stuff. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and send our wonderful artist live, and we'll go from there. Thea, I'm going to send you live now. All you.
Amazing. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Live Art Welding with Thea. That's me. I am so excited you're here tonight. We're going to learn a bunch about different processes of metal fabrication and welding. We're going to finish up the projects that have been being built so far. We have a very cool, sleek kitchen stool that you're going to be able to check out. And we also have a more artistic, bendy, free-flowing planter. So 2 projects that both exhibit different types of metal fabrication and skills. Without further ado, let's get started. The first project I'm going to be showing and finishing up is the planter. So I'm going to be jumping in and using oxyacetylene. Oxyacetylene are, I'm going to tilt you guys ever so slightly to the right so you can see, this is an oxyacetylene setup. It's basically a tank of oxygen and a tank of acetylene. And what that process involves is you combine the oxygen and acetylene to create an incredibly hot flame. And that flame can be used in a number of different ways. You can use it to weld, you can use it to heat up the metal and bend it and change its form, and you can actually even cut through the metal. We're just going to be using that to bend the metal, so you're going to see a big billowing flame, and I'm going to talk to you about the different parts of that flame, how to balance the oxygen and acetylene to make the hottest and most efficiently burning flame. The core of that flame can actually reach to 6,000 degrees, so it's incredibly hot. You can feel radiant heat like feet away from it. So I'm going to first just light up that flame, and so you guys can see it, play around with it a couple of times, and then I'm going to walk back over to my project. We're going to talk about this planter, we're going to brainstorm and weld some stuff onto it, bend some stuff onto it, and hopefully make it look awesome. Oh, too much hair. As tonight goes on, you're going to see me suiting up in all sorts of different personal protective equipment. With oxyacetylene, I get to wear these super funky shades. These are actually called Shade 5, and that refers to how dark they are. When you wear sunglasses, you're wearing Shade 2, and when I'm going to be wearing my helmet later, that's Shade 13. So it's a lot darker and offers more protection. With oxyacetylene, I just need Shade 5 glasses, so that's all I'm going to be wearing. To kick off and get my flame going, I'm going to be using this flint striker. Basically, we like using flint strikers because we don't like holding a bunch of flammable gas in our hands when we're about to light a huge amount of very flammable gas. So I'm going to light it up with my flint striker. And my goal here is to make it so that you can see the flame and I don't set my laptop on fire. So cross your fingers for me. Nothing like kicking off a live event with a big flame. All right, so what was I doing there? You saw I cracked one of the little knobs and I lit my acetylene. Oxygen is not flammable, luckily. And so the first gas that flowed out was my acetylene. I lit that and I twisted the nozzle. You saw the flame grow larger. And then I twisted open my oxygen and started feeding oxygen into the flame. There are different visual cues to use to make sure you have the correct balance of acetylene and oxygen in the flame so that it's burning at its hottest amount. And so I did that a couple of times. I don't know if you were able to see the flame grow kind of more billowy and orange, and then it would shrink down and have a bluer tint. That directly relates to the amount of oxygen and acetylene in it. So that's the first tool I'm going to be using. I'm going to be making my planter over here. I have my cactus right here. One of the things I love best about welding is that you can pretend and imagine that you're in a new world and you can make things that you would like to be real and make them happen. So I'm pretending that I live in a world where I don't kill every single plant I come into contact with. And so far, the only plant that I have that's ever survived is this cactus. So I'm going to make it a planter. Okay, I'm going to tilt you guys a little bit back so you can see a little bit better over here. One cool thing about this fabrication technique is you can see that I have my base for my planter here, and I actually just welded a support straight to my table. I set the height I wanted it at, and now I'm just having fun bending the rods coming down for this. I'm essentially reverse engineering it. I'm saying, this is where I want my final object to sit, and I made a jig, a very simple jig, albeit just welding it to the table, and now that gives me a lot of room to play, be artistic, and play around, mess with the metal a little bit. I'm going to show you what bending one of those pieces looks like, and then I'm actually going to cut those away, and we're going to make it for real, because those are kind of just demo pieces so people can see how formwork happens with metal. So I'm going to do one more time, and then I'm going to cut them away, and we're going to do it for real. I love people being able to see how forgiving metal is in this way, because it has that additive and subtractive process that makes it very kind of playful. You can add more, cut it away, add more. It's unlike wood in that way, and it just gives you a lot of freedom to explore different shapes, objects, and designs that you want to try out. All right. As easy as if it were Play-Doh. So you can see that by putting a bunch of heat into the metal, you're actually able to change the form of the metal. And it is just so inspiring to me every time that I can use my bare hands and just bend metal to my will, however I want to see it. You might have been able to see metal goes through a couple of different colors as it heats up. Red, orange, yellow, and then white is metal at its hottest. And essentially at white, it will start sparkling and be burning. Yes, fun fact, metal can burn. So you want to keep it right in that kind of nice yellow range to make it easily bendable and pliable. All right, now you're going to get to see a different kind of sparks because I'm going to cut away those rods that I have up on my planter holder now, and then start on a kind of more planned out, shall we say, design concept. So I'm going to use my angle grinder. Whenever you see this tool, know that it's going to get a little bit loud for a moment, but it'll only be a moment, and it shoots a lot of sparks. And who doesn't love sparks? I'm going to change out the wheel on my angle grinder. Angle grinders are one of the most useful tools to have in your shop because there are all different kinds of wheels you can put on them. So you can do finishing, grinding, cutting, notching, all sorts of stuff like that. I'm going to change it out to a cutting disc. Important to tighten it as much as you can, hand tighten that. Counterintuitively, if you hand tighten your angle grinding discs more, it makes them easier to come off. All right, folks. Put in my ear protection. I have these super long ear plugs and I feel like they make me look like Shrek. Just so you can see a little bit better what's going on. I'll push you back when we're doing welding and plasma cutting later, but I want you to try to see this as well as you can. I'm going to throw my cactus up here in all of its glory. So you can see I have this plate, and now I'm going to weld on some supports for this plant holder and be a little bit more careful in my design for this. As ever, folks, if you have any kind of questions at all about what I'm doing, metal fabrication, you know, anything that pops into your mind or projects you've worked on that you got a question about, don't hesitate to just write it down in the comments and I'll be over to answer as soon as I can. All right. What you're going to see now is me doing a little bit of MIG welding onto this piece. And I'm going to tell you all about MIG welding in just a moment, but I just had a question come in. And let me read that out now. How do you know how to control the ease of use on your grinder and cutter? Does the ABC rule apply? Great question. The ABC rule is always be comfortable, and I apply that to a lot of different types of welding because if you don't have a good comfortable body position while you're welding, you aren't going to be able to have the careful, small, fine motor skill control that's necessary to do actually very careful, tiny work Even though we work with these really high temperatures and these big flames, a lot of welding and metal fabrication is in very careful manipulations of the material. So for ease of use on my grinding and cutting wheel, you could definitely say that the ABC rule applies in the sense that you don't want to force it. And you can really feel that in your body, like you're cutting through metal. So there's some kickback, you know, you have to lean into it and you have to have a little muscle into it. But if you're forcing it and you can hear maybe a higher pitched squealing in the wheel of your angle grinder, you don't want to do that. It's bad for the tool, and it's actually will be bad for you because it's a vibrating tool and you don't want to grip overly hard on it because that's ultimately gonna be really bad for your hands and wrists. So ABC in the sense that be forceful, but don't force it. And you can definitely feel that feedback in your body with the tool. All right, so I'm gonna hop in and do a little bit of MIG welding. MIG welding is an electrical kind of welding process. You're gonna see some sparks. I'm gonna put on my welding lid. I can talk more about MIG welding in depth in a little bit. Throw up any questions you have though. Again, I don't know how many of you are people who are returning, so I don't wanna bore you and repeat myself too much. All right. I'm going to use my mistake as a learning moment. My ground clamp was clamped to my other welding table. This ground clamp and this welding torch are the two parts of an electrical circuit. And when that circuit is completed, that's what strikes my welding arc. So I got to make sure my ground clamp is clamped to the right table. All right, so I used a MIG welder to tap in 3 rods, and I'm going to make a kind of tripod-like stand. I used a plasma cutter to cut out some leaves earlier. I'll probably do at least 1 more leaf so you can see that process, or perhaps a different shape. My idea for this planter is I'm going to have straight rods coming down, but then I want to get fun and curve them around on the ground and maybe have them coming up and growing into some leaves underneath inside the planter. So we'll see how it looks. So I'm going to fire up the oxyacetylene and start heating up these metals and bending them around, playing around with them. Switch here. The next bends I'm going to do are actually up top here, and I don't have as much material to hold on to up top, and so when I do that, I preset a pair of vice grips to the right width that I need, and I put them off to the side. I preset that because it is of the utmost importance that I don't lose heat after I turn off my oxyacetylene and before I start bending and manipulating my metal. So I preset these and have them right on hand, and you'll see I'm going to move super fast, put my oxyacetylene down, grab these, and start bending this to manipulate it so that I don't lose too much heat. doing over here? Now I'm just gonna play around with rods at different lengths and sizes. Again, building up kind of like a root system on the ground. I'll also trim these down, curve around, play with them as well. So you'll see my angle grinder for the cutting disc, I can just chop through any of this very easily. Striker. This is the game I call Where's My Flint Striker? And I play it a lot. Where's my blank is kind of my constant theme in the shop, but I figure walking around the shop looking for things like my gloves and flint strikers is how I keep my step count up. looks like I have another question coming in. Let's see. Ooh, I have such a maze of tools here that I'm constantly navigating because I just brought all of the tools in the shop right over here so that I could have them to work with for these projects. So you're going to see me doing the tool dance a lot. All right. Great question. For doing large quantities of the same item, in this case, those bent rods, do you set up a template and rig some method of measuring and bending? I know, yeah, yes. Basically, yes. And what that template or mechanism is called is a jig. And so if I'm doing a bunch of the same item with bending, a jig is completely necessary because it's very hard to make things exactly the same when you're bending them in three-dimensional space and they can go in all different angles. So for this demonstration, this project is kind of to show you how kind of loose and playful metal can be. And I'm going to be kind of changing all of these at the bottom. But definitely if you want to make a bunch of the same type of item, whether it's fabricated or bent, making a jig, and a jig, you can almost think about it, it's like the inverse of an object. And so that you can place the object into your jig, it will register the jig, register it, make it square, whatever you need, and then tack weld it together. Or for bending, a lot of jigs, you actually weld them directly onto your table. So if I want a nice smooth curve and I need to make 10 pieces that have the same exact curve, I need to find either an object, like a piece of metal that has that curve already, or I need to make one properly with that curve by hand. And then once I have that one, I can tack weld it to the table. And then I just weld to one end of that, and I pull it all the way around my jig as I heat up the metal, and that means I'll get the same curve every time. So very important to use jigs when you're trying to do a bunch of the same item. Luckily, that's not what we're trying to do here. I'm just playing around. I also was concerned that if I was doing a bunch of bending on the table, you guys wouldn't be able to see it at all. So I'm doing this kind of vertical bending method. Yeah, playing around. Hopefully that answers your question. Let me know if you want any follow-up information. All right. Tool dance. This plant fits on it like this. Do a little test. All right, all right. Yep, as I thought, I need to bend that back a little bit more. Pliers over here. Bend back, and then we're going to get and do the fun stuff on the bottom. Basically, again, I want simple on top, and then I want kind of a root system and lots of bends and curves and some of these weaves on the ground. Clamps on the top and metal clamps on the bottom. This is where we get to use some of the fun bends we made earlier and get a little artistic and crazy. Switch to Mig Welding for a moment. I put an extra amount of weld on this joint over here because you can actually use welding beads themselves as sculpting techniques. So you can really load up a lot of weld onto a piece of rod that you're forming and then smooth it out with an angle grinder like you've seen me using earlier, and be able to kind of create a slightly more organic form, and a form that translates from slightly thinner material into thicker material. Since I'm playing with an idea of kind of vines and leaves at the bottom of this planter, I'm using that technique. So when I go through with a finishing grinding pass, I'll be able to add and play around with that type of form change for this piece.
Every time after I'm finished heating through a piece of metal, I have to scrape it off because it forms this slag on the surface of the metal, which are actually all of the impurities of the metal rising up to the surface. And if you leave the slag on there as it cools, it will start to harden onto the surface of the metal and give a very kind of ugly, strange gray surface of material that is both not aesthetically pleasing and can start to mess with your material if you continue to heat it. All right.
action down there. Hopefully you can see it well enough from there. All right. Let's see what time it is. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of grinding work on this, and then I'm going to switch over to the plasma cutter. I'm going to plasma cut out one more leaf so that you guys can see that process and get a peek at a different type of fabrication process. And then I'm going to treat all of my leaves by taking off the slag on the back. You'll know more about that in a second. And then I'm going to start to put them on the ends of this. Again, I'm kind of sketching all of this together, and once I have forms that I'm interested in, I'll continue to bend and tweak it. So it's a very different process than you might have seen earlier when I was making my kitchen stool, which I'll also give you a sneak peek of in just a moment. Start with all that. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna push you back a little bit, and so we can head over to the plasma cutting station on the other table. We're gonna cut out a leaf, prep those leaves, and then throw them on there. At the end of this, I'm actually even going to be heating and forming the leaves because they're cut out of straight, flat material, and you'll be able to see that even that flat material, with the oxyacetylene setup, you can give a more organic bend to them. All right, folks, you can see here the kitchen stool that we made earlier. As you can see, very different type of fabrication technique with this. Carefully kind of angled cuts, making sure that everything's square and comes together neatly. So almost an exact opposition to what we're doing over there, where we're using heat, we're bending, we're shaping, we're kind of making it up as we go along. Two completely valid and very different types of metal fabrication processes, and really just serves to show you how dynamic metal is as a material in terms of your ability to transform it into different objects, sculptures, furniture for your home, stuff like that. All right, so I'm going to be using a technique called plasma cutting. Plasma cutting works by using an electrical circuit and closing that circuit through an electrical arc, which is forced through air that's spinning in a circle in the nozzle of the plasma cutter. And that intense amount of heat and the very fast spinning of that air actually turns it into plasma, which is the fourth state of matter, which is super, super cool. So that plasma jet blasts through your piece. It can get up to 40,000 degrees, so incredibly, incredibly hot. It blasts through your metal, cutting it instantly. You can do very smooth, artistic, kind of curving shapes with plasma cutting. It's a really dynamic tool and cutting process, and just so fun to use. You get to feel kind of like a Jedi. You're wielding this plasma torch and cutting through metal like it's butter. It's very fun. So I'm going to set up, I'm going to draw a leaf. I'm going to tilt you down a little bit so you can see the plasma process a little bit more easily. I'm going to draw a leaf out. On this piece of sheet metal right here. And I'm going to go hook up my plasma cutter to the compressed air and then start plasma cutting. just went and turned off the air compressor so we can hear ourselves think again, and I will show you the leaf I just cut out. Voila! So it can be very tempting to reach down and grab your piece that you just cut out. It's super exciting. You just made this awesome looking shape with your plasma cutter, but it is still ripping hot, even though it's not showing red heat. So make sure you don't pick it up with your hands. I'm really excited about this kind of inverted cutout leaf shape. The edges need to be cleaned up a little bit. And on the backhand side, there's a bunch of dross and slag that I'm gonna have to chip away with a pry and a chipping hammer. You don't really want to grind that away because that dross is actually almost pure carbon, so it would take a lot of tool and grinding wheels to be able to grind that fully away. So our next step will be chipping that clear. I'm gonna turn off the air so it's slightly quieter. And I think we had another question come in, so let's see. What type of protective gear do we need to have and use at minimum to do welds and plasma cuts? No bad questions. It's an excellent question, and you're gonna see me moving back and forth between all types of protective gear throughout tonight. So what I was just wearing for plasma cutting are shade 5 glasses. That means they are 5 shades of darkness. So your regular sunglasses are about 2 shades of darkness. My welding helmet, however, is 13 shades of darkness. So with plasma cutting, the main protective equipment you need are these shade 5 glasses for your eyes. If you're plasma cutting metal that's a little dirty or gross, you might also want to wear a respirator. This is clean metal. It's very light, easy plasma cutting, so I don't need to wear a respirator with it. For welding, you need a lot more protective equipment. It depends on the type of welding you're doing, but for MIG and TIG, which is what I'm doing today, you always need a welding helmet. The welding helmet both makes it a lot darker so that you can see the arc and see your puddle and see what's going on, because that welding arc is incredibly bright. It also protects your whole face, both from sparks and from UV rays. The welding arc is actually so bright that you can get sunburn from it, which is really crazy to think about. So, and in addition to protecting yourself from heat and sparks and stuff like that, you actually have to make sure all of your skin is covered. Otherwise you can end up with a sunburn from welding. A lot of people also just put on sunscreen. As you can see, I'm wearing these welding sleeves. They protect my arms from heat and sparks, and they also protect me from UV. I have a little bit of skin showing up here. That's totally fine if you're doing light welding and you put on sunscreen, although there are definitely a lot of welders who get funny little strips of sunburn on the upper part of their arms, like little upper arm bracelets of sunburn because of this very phenomenon. Do you ever see someone with a sunburn right on the top of their arm? You know they're a welder. So that's the basics of the kind of protective equipment that you need to use. The problem is heat, the problem is sparks, and the problem is UV rays, and that can really get you. So safety glasses, respirators, all that good stuff. All right, so. I'm going to take one of my leaves that I cut out earlier and chip away at all of the dross to clean off my leaf and then be able to stick it onto my planter over there and start manipulating the form. First, looks like we had another question come in. This is so dangerous. What made you decide to do this? And do you earn your livelihood doing this, or is it just a hobby? It can be quite dangerous, but if you know what you're doing and you act responsibly and you use proper protective equipment and stuff like that, you can really mitigate the amount of harm you can cause. That being said, there are shop accidents, and you have to always be on your toes at all times. Fun fact, before I became a welder, I used to tour in the circus as an aerialist, so like high trapeze, stuff like that. So in a way, welding is a lot safer than what my last job used to be, so that's a win. And circus is actually how I got into welding, which can get to the second part of the question. My livelihood, is it a hobby? It's both, I would say. I've done a huge amount of teaching, welding, blacksmithing, metal fabrication. I do a lot of design work and custom fabrication work for the film industry. I live in LA, so different movies, music videos, commercials, a lot of the set design and build and special effects I do work on with that. And I do a fair amount of kind of events like this or larger STEAM education training. I think that welding and general fabrication as tools to empower you to create the world you want to live in are truly unique in that sense. And I love being able to share them with as many people as I can. So I make most of my money from either performance work or different welding work, whether it's teaching, custom fabrication, and then also my own artwork. For my own artwork, I do a lot of different stuff, but I build sculptures that I perform on as an aerialist. So hopefully that answers your question. It is dangerous, but I'm no longer hanging from my toes from a circus, in a circus tent. So, you know, I always joke around that, you know, my parents might be disappointed in my decisions in career, but actually they're just so relieved I'm no longer touring with the circus. They're totally fine with whatever I do, so. Okay. Okay, so as you can see, I have clamped up my leaf to the table here, and I'm just going to chip away at this dross. To get rid of it. Can you see that well enough? Hopefully you can see a little bit of what's going on there with that dross. I'm chipping it away, and it's coming off in these big flakes from my piece, just snapping off the back of my piece. Again, this is very high carbon, so it's easy to snap. end up with a much cleaner looking leaf. Catch the light there. All right. So I'm not going to make you watch me hammer dross all night. I'm just going to do this one leaf and now take it over to my planter and add it onto one of kind of the root systems on the bottom, and then just kind of keep building up the bottom there. So I'm going to drag this back over to the back tape a little bit. I apologize for the movement. If you're someone who gets seasick, just close your eyes for 5 seconds. All right. All right, one more question before hopping back onto this. And then I've been a little concerned tonight that this is kind of hard to see. So I might switch back to the stool for probably the last half hour, just to make sure that you guys are getting good visibility of the different processes I'm doing. Unfortunately, I have to work on this back table when I'm doing oxyacetylene work because this other table is a precision fabrication table, and I don't want to put a lot of heat into that table because it will make the metal warp, and I'll no longer have a precision fab table. So this back table is kind of my, more junky, warpy, heat working table that I work with. So that's why the oxyacetylene has to stay back there. Let's see about this next question. Now I let the circus come to me, that's right. Do I do custom work? And if so, where do I work from? I do custom work. I can be more selective these days about the types of jobs that I take. I love very customized, high-end, high-craft work. I like being able to think of everything as a unique piece of art or sculpture for someone's home or however they're going to be interacting with it. So I love very customized work and working closely with a client for that. And then otherwise, since I do a lot of event, film industry, production work, usually a lot of the stuff for that is fairly customized as well because it has to be for a specific look or a specific event. Right now, this is the main shop that I'm working out of. I share it with a barbecue smoker company, and I also do some work for them. So there are a lot of smokers around this shop, and that's the main thing that comes out of here, but I also do custom jobs here. I used to have another studio last fall, but transitioned out of that space, and I'm hoping to set up a new, larger personal shop by the end of the year, hopefully, depending how this year unfolds. All right, I'm gonna get this leaf welded on, do a little bit more oxyacetylene, and then come back to this front table where visibility is a little bit better, and do the finish welds, and talk to you about patinas for finishing up this kitchen stool. All right. All of the things. The last film that I worked for, I actually am under NDA because it hasn't come out yet. And so I only started doing films this past year, and then started doing some more on-screen talent work for TV networks. But unfortunately, I can't give any details about any of that because of NDA. right. So you can see that I was using a pulse welding technique, or pulse tacks, to, again, build up a little bit more weld bead, build up a little bit more thickness around my piece that I can grind later, and again, just make it a little bit more organic, a little bit more sculptural. We have the stool as the straight metal fabrication, and then we have this planter as this kind of sculptural, changing the form of metal object. So many things to do, so little time. All right. As promised, back over to our kitchen stool, where I'm going to do a couple finish welds on that and then prep it for patina and talk about surface treatments so that you can see a piece that comes full circle from raw material all the way to having a patina finish on it. One last time I'm moving you, I promise this is the last. All right. As you can see, I am excellent at keeping my workspace clean. A true pro at that. All right, so I'm going to do a last couple of welds on this, and then flip it over and reinforce the bottom of this skirt with some TIG beads so that you can see that process as well. Since we're moving on to the electrical welding portion of our evening, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what those processes entail. So what you just saw was Mig welding. There are 3 different types of electrical welding. There's Mig, there's TIG, and then there's stick. Stick welding you aren't going to see tonight. That's what you have maybe seen in the movies, where someone's holding what looks like a very long stick, which is a consumable electrode covered with flux. And stick welding is used for very thick material, very structural, you know, skyscrapers, stuff like that, at least 1/4 inch material and up. So if you're in a shop, you're doing kind of lighter custom work, furniture, stuff like that, you're rarely going to use stick welding in it. Mig welding is the most common form of welding. People sometimes call it the hot glue gun version of welding because, let me grab my Mig gun. All kinds of tangled up. As you can see, when I pull this trigger, I turned off the machine so it wouldn't make too much noise, but I turned it on quickly. So you can see when I pull this trigger, wire actually spools out. And that's similar to, again, a hot glue gun, kind of spitting out this material that's going to help with fusion. All 3 electrical welding processes have the same basic things happening. The first is electricity flowing. Electricity flows from the wall and into the machine, and inside the machine is essentially a transformer. So it transforms your current into a low voltage, high amperage output, a direct current as opposed to the AC current that's coming in from the wall. So from the welder, what's coming out is a high amperage that you can set to different amounts depending on the thickness of the material you're welding. You're closing a circuit with a little welding arc, and that welding arc can get between 7 to 11,000 degrees. So it's incredibly hot. It arcs down to your material and starts melting it immediately. If you've ever jumped a car and seen that little blue lightning bolt between car batteries, that is the welding arc. That's what you're using while you're welding, closing that electrical circuit. That filler material that spools out, which I just showed you, that is a filler material that you're adding into your weld puddle to strengthen your weld. So if you're walking down the street and you see a bench or a lamppost or something like that, go over to it and look at it, and you'll see all the little raised weld beads and welds on it that are holding it together from when it was fabricated. The reason those puddles are raised is because of the filler material you've added, which is making that welded part of the object even stronger. So if you do your job right as a welder, since you're adding material, it will end up being the strongest part of whatever the object is. The last thing that we add in is shielding gas. So you've probably seen the bottles attached to my welders as I've been moving this computer around a little bit. That shielding gas, it can be a lot of different types of gases. When I'm MIG welding, it's 75-25, that is 75% argon and 25% CO2. When I'm TIG welding, it's 100% argon, but there are a lot of different gases that have different characteristics depending on what type of thing you want to be welding. That shielding gas flows through and is funneled by a little cone to be around your weld puddle, protecting it from contamination in the atmosphere when you are welding. So it protects your weld puddle and pushes out any contamination and especially oxygen. When metal is in its molten state, it wants to bond with oxygen and create a compound called iron oxide, which is just a fancy word for rust. You don't want rust in your material at all, and definitely not in your weld. So that shielding gas is an incredibly important part of the welding process. If you get rust inside your weld, it's actually called porosity, and it's a welder's worst nightmare. You have to grind away your full weld and start again from the beginning. So those are the three different components. I'm going to now show you a little bit of TIG welding, which is a more refined process. You're going to see I'm going to hold my electrode torch in one hand, I'm going to hold my filler material in the other hand, and I'm going to manually add filler material to my weld puddle. I'm going to be affecting the amount of amperage that's coming out with a foot pedal that I'm manipulating with my foot on the ground, and depending on how hard I'm pushing down on that foot pedal, it affects the amount of amperage that's coming out. All right, so okay. So I have my TIG torch here, my ground clamp here. Again, it's an electrical welding process, so I need my positive side and my negative parts of my circuit. This is my filler material. I'm going to go ahead and cut this. Again, I'm able to cut through this about 50% of the time. Blame it on the pliers, not on my strength. There we go. All right, so I added these pieces of 3/16 material along the bottom of my kitchen stool. I just wanted a slightly heavier and wider base to make sure it sat perfectly, solidly level on the ground. When you add things like this to furniture, it's often called adding a skirt onto your furniture. I'm going to tilt this sideways, so hopefully it will give you guys a better view of the welding process. Get my little welding stool. All right. So here's my torch that I mentioned. with my tungsten electrode. TIG stands for tungsten inert gas. Tungsten is actually an element on the periodic table, and it has a couple of cool properties, the main one being that it has a melting point of over 6,000 degrees. So you can weld all day with it, and it won't deform or warp with the heat that's being channeled through it. Fun fact, tungsten is what they make the noses of rocket ships out of. So it's pretty cool. I'm clamping down my piece to make sure it doesn't work too much. Welding is all about heat management and making sure your piece does not warp or distort. It's a huge part of your job as a welder. TIG bead down there. Since I'm here, I'm going to grab my Mig welder, and now I'm going to just stitch around, going back and forth between Mig and TIG, just so you can see the different processes right alongside each other. Mig produces a lot of slag, as you can see, all those sparks and spatter that you see when I'm doing the welding. That is why the cone on the Mig welder is made out of copper, because steel and copper don't want to fuse together. So it's actually really easy just to knock off that slag, which is pretty cool, you know, designing things around their material properties. So you can see very different processes. I'm going to do 2 more small finishing welds here, 1 more finishing weld here, and then I'm going to do a bit of a grinding, cleaning pass on the piece to set it up for our patina. Super slick, super fine. TIG welding is sometimes called the Ferrari of welding because it's just so refined and you can do very delicate, pretty looking welds with it. And then Mig welding. The reality is every tool has its time and place when it's better to use one tool versus another tool. And part of being a good fabricator and designer and maker is knowing when to use which tool. There's a lot of different ways to cut metal. There's a lot of different ways to fuse metal, form metal, shape metal. And all of those different ways have a time and place that will make your job easier and end up resulting in the best possible object that you can make. Getting close to done. This is always the exciting part. So we have our skirt welded on there. I'm going to put on some ear protection and do a light pass with the angle grinder to essentially clean the metal fully down, basically by taking the top layer off. To make sure that it will take on my patina very well. All right. All right, so we have just enough time for you to see the beginning of the patina process, and then tomorrow in my last half-hour segment, I'll finish the patina process and show off the full welded stool. I did enough grinding. I only needed to grind away one type of material. The actual part of the stool is made out of cold rolled steel. There are different forming processes for steel. One is cold rolled and one is hot rolled. Those are the two main ones. Cold rolled steel is a cold forming process, as the name might suggest. And in the cold forming process, the steel doesn't form any kind of mill scale on its surface. So it's easy to clean and slightly nicer to work with. It can also easily take something like a patina or any type of finishing surface treatment you want to work on or put on it. On the skirt on the bottom of this kitchen stool, I use a hot rolled type of steel, and hot rolled steel is a hot forming process, as the name suggests. And during that hot forming process, a lot of the impurities in the metal rise to the surface, and they create a mill scale along the surface, which protects the metal from rusting, but ultimately is not a very nice surface to have to weld on. And it's also a surface that's very hard to do any type of finishing on. So you have to actually physically grind away that mill scale, which is what you just saw me do. Let's prop this up. Looking pretty good. Pretty exciting. I'm gonna get gloves, a propane torch, and the patina, and show you exactly how to do a cleaning process, how to preheat the metal, and then spray the patina on there so you can chemically patina the surface of your metal for a finishing of your piece. Gonna use some rubber gloves to protect my hands. These gloves are getting very hard to find these days. So first I'm gonna clean this cold rolled part of my piece with a little bit of acetone. And then I'm going to start heating it up with this propane torch. Why a propane torch when I have an awesome oxyacetylene setup over there? Because the oxyacetylene setup would actually get way too hot. You saw that huge flame. I told you it got up to 6,000 degrees. So I'd actually be melting this piece, warping it, distorting it. I just want to warm up the piece so that it can take on the patina more easily. But I'm not looking to melt it or change its form. So I just need a lighter propane torch. See that nicely? right. 10 minutes. All right, let's fire this up. First. So the patina I'm using today is Japanese brown. It's a very traditional patina. It just kind of gives a textured, sort of warm, rusty appearance. Had a question coming in. Have I worked with copper sheet metal? I have a little bit, mostly only really thin copper. I did a lot of copper forming for smaller kind of sculptural fine art projects. Copper is weldable with a TIG welder, but it's very challenging. So all the copper work I did was soldering, which is different than welding. Soldering is more closely related to brazing. It's where you use a filler material with a lower melting point as essentially a glue to stick the pieces together. So unlike welding, you aren't fusing it and making it all one piece. You're using a separate type of material to act as a glue. But copper is an amazing material, and it takes patinas beautifully. Whenever I work with copper, I end up doing a nice bright green kind of teal patina. I love that painterly finish going in kind of conjunction with the warmth of the copper. What does patina do to the metal? There are different types of patina. This is a traditional patina, and it's actually a chemical interaction with the properties of the metal itself, which is one of the reasons I like it, because I really love process-based work. I love the materials informing me of the design and artistic decisions I'm going to make. And so patinas and the type of patinas you can use range very widely depending on the type of material you're working with. Is it functional for protection, or is it more for aesthetics, nice looking finish? Both. So it's functional in the sense that this is just mild steel. So if I left this out, it would slowly get rusty over time. And, you know, many years from now, that rust would probably rust all the way through it. Since it's metal, we don't really need to worry about that. But no one wants anything in their house sitting around getting rusty. So the patina will protect from that rust. And then it also is a nice aesthetic surface looking finish. There are so many different types of patinas, from you know, black to bright green, stuff like that. And then there are also some patinas that you can fake a little bit more. Again, I was mentioning I really love doing a teal patina on copper. That teal patina doesn't really interact with steel, but there are ways you can fake it with steel. And some patinas that even will come, like that teal patina, that will come with kind of copper in it to interact with it. So it becomes almost a little bit more like a chemical paint you're applying to your piece. So both functional, as it protects your piece from rusting, and aesthetics, as it gives you a nice surface finish. Have my little spray bottle of patina. And hopefully set this up so that you guys can see it. I thought Japanese brown would be a fun patina to do because it's a very traditional patina, and also you can just immediately see the steel change color as it hits the steel, which is just very fun to watch as a chemical interaction. Glove off. can see I'm feeling with the back of my hand. The back of your hand is more sensitive than the palm of your hand. So whenever you want to feel for radiant heat, this even goes for, you know, the cast iron pan in your kitchen. Just wave the back of your hand over it, and we'll be able to feel for radiant heat to see kind of whether it's touchable, or in our case, whether it's ready for an awesome patina. That smoke rising up, and that kind of nice, deep kind of burnt copper brown that's happening on the surface of the metal. I get so excited. Looking good. Catch the light there. Maybe even lift this up. Bring it a little bit closer to you. So hopefully you can see, I'm gonna move it around a little bit. Some of that nice kind of, it's this coppery brown color. Once I'm done patinaing this, which I'm going to be finishing up tomorrow morning, I'm going to wipe it down with boiled linseed oil, and that will really bring out those rich tonal browns, and it will make it kind of, you know, antiqued a little bit, give it some texture to the piece. I'm going to do one more pass with the patina. Such an awesome process. I love it so much. We're almost at the end of our session, so I am going to show off the very simple wood square that I cut earlier. I always joke around about how much I hate working with wood because I'm a metal worker and I prefer metal, and it's only partially a joke. So honestly, the fact that I was able to cut this square, I'm pretty proud of myself. And that sits beautifully into the top of my stool. So once I finish patining all of this, I will also wipe down that wood with a nice boiled linseed oil, and I'll end up with a stool that is 28 inches tall and perfectly sittable. I told you guys that I wasn't going to move you again. I'm sorry, I just did. But I want to bring the stool down, put it on the floor, and so you guys can kind of see the height of it and how it's going to be functioning as an awesome kitchen stool. So hard to get all of this in a laptop screen. Thanks for bearing with me. So now you can see that nice top of our stool. going to lean against it, but I don't want to lean against the part that's hot. So a perfect kitchen stool. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. We bounced around a lot because I wanted to pack a lot in of the different types of materials, processes, and ways that you can manipulate metal, fabrication techniques, and projects you can do. So we did oxyacetylene. Again, that's that big hot flame where you can bend and form metal, and it's a much more artistic approach to fabrication. And then we finished up welding our stool, and then started patina finishes. Tomorrow I'm going to finish up the patina, and so you can see what a fully complete object looks like. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for stopping by, and stop through tomorrow if you want to see how this stool ends up coming out.